Good afternoon. My name is Marla McGinnis, and I will be your moderator for today's Hurricane Fiona media availability. Today's participants include Jason Mew from Nova Scotia Emergency Management Office, Matt Drover from Nova Scotia Power, Rear Admiral Brian Santapia from the Canadian Armed Forces, Christina Lamy from Cape Breton Regional Municipality, Erica Fleck from Halifax Regional Fire and Emergency, and Bill Lawler from the Canadian Red Cross. Before we take questions, Mr. Mew has a few opening remarks. Go ahead, Mr. Mew.
Thanks, Marla. Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate that it's been a tough 3 days for Nova Scotians. Just wanted to let you know that roads are being cleared of trees and debris, allowing Nova Scotia Power to work on power lines. There's many more roads to go. Please continue to stay off the roads if possible and give those crews the space they need to do their work. We're working with all our fuel suppliers, both Irving and Imperial Oil, to prioritize fuel delivery as quickly as possible. All fuel terminals now have power and fuel deliveries are underway to stations now. We're also working closely with Nova Scotia Power to ensure that fuel stations without power are given a priority. And we appreciate your patience, and please use this time to check on your family, friends, and neighbors. Thank you. Over to you, Marla.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mew. All participants are now happy to take questions from media. We will be using the one question, one follow-up format for today. A reminder to all reporters, please identify who your question is for before you ask it. We're going to start with Jean Laroche with CBC. Go ahead, Jean.
Thanks, Marla. My questions, first round, go to the Rear Admiral. Sir, how many people do you have in each of the 5 provinces affected by it? And what specifically is their job?
Thanks for the question, Jean. We received requests for assistance in the Canadian Forces from 3 of those 5 provinces. So New Brunswick and Quebec both felt they could handle the emergency with their own resources, primarily, I suspect, because they weren't in the main track. Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland all asked for assistance from the Canadian Forces through public safety. We have been tasked to provide assistance to all 3 of those provinces by putting troops forward who can help to clear away debris and make the job easier to restore power. And so that's the work that they're primarily doing. At this point, we have a company plus in all 3 of those provinces. In Nova Scotia, there's a company plus, well over 100 people now up receiving tasks in the Cape Breton area. The command and control element will move forward from Truro up to Cape Breton and manage that situation there. In Prince Edward Island, they asked for help in 3 specific communities. And again, we have a company plus of soldiers who came out of Gagetown and have moved up and are receiving tasks and getting on with the work today there. And then in Newfoundland, we're working, building ourselves up to a company plus of people in Western Newfoundland. They're soldiers generating out of militia units in all across the island, but they're all moving forward to the western side of the province to help out. Additionally, Margaret Brook, HMCS Margaret Brook, the second of the new Arctic and offshore patrol ships, has been tasked. They were on their way back from Nanook, so they were tasked to leave St. John's this morning, and they'll be conducting wellness checks along the south coast of Newfoundland en route to Port aux Basques to see what assistance they might be able to give us in addition to the troops that are going there.
Rear Admiral, I don't know whether you were around for Hurricane Juan. One of the problems was the military was deployed, but they didn't have the equipment necessary. I think they were trying to clear brush with axes rather than saw-scope. Do you have what equipment do you have to help out? And do you have what you need?
Yeah, so I was around for Juan, absolutely. And I think we learned a lot of lessons from that. And we've done a lot of these over the last few years. Each of the immediate response units across the country have pack-up kits that are designed to help out. So it's the kind of heavy tools and chainsaws and things that they need in order to do a good job of clearing out. What we don't have are the right sort of vehicles to haul things away, and we work hand in glove with the municipalities in order to take tasks on that involve clearing away of debris, and then we work with the municipalities in order to get it loaded onto trucks and to get it hauled away. It's really a case of many hands make light work. But as you say, it's better to have the right equipment, and so we've got the right equipment for those teams now.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Jonathan McGinnis with CTV. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Hi, thank you for this. My question is for Matt Drover. Matt, in Nova Scotia, how goes the restoration of power, province-wide?
Yes, so as you know, there's been severe damage throughout our province, especially in the eastern part of Nova Scotia, including Cape Breton Island. We've seen thousands of trees come down into our infrastructure, which has basically impacted hundreds of poles. In some neighborhoods, we have full streets where poles are on the ground, and our crews are in there rebuilding those poles as we speak. So definitely significant impact. We have lots of resources on the ground, and we're doing everything we can to safely and quickly restore power.
Jonathan, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, could I ask Christina LeMay just what the biggest issue right now is in Cape Breton?
The biggest issue, generally speaking, well, I can't really nail down just one. We have major issues with fuel supply and also our restoration. The military just started, they're deployed now in conjunction with Nova Scotia Power to focus on clearing the debris around down power lines. That's their number one. Then moving on from that to roads. Another priority for the folks who are displaced is what is the plan of action in regards to disaster financial assistance to return them to their homes as soon as possible, which we know will be a long process, but getting that process started is important as well. So we have several requests for assistance in regards to especially the prioritization of the reconnection and of fuel supply to the city and also the obvious issues with power supply everywhere as well.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Lindsey Armstrong with the Canadian Press. Go ahead, Lindsey. We have Lindsey Armstrong here. Okay, I'll move on to Brian Flynn with All Nova Scotia. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you. I guess the first question might be for Jason Mew, but it could be for somebody else, maybe Christina. I'm not sure, but I think Nova Scotians in particular, I've seen a lot of problems with cell phones and even landlines being out for an extended period of time. And I'm wondering to what extent that is impeding the efforts of the different agencies involved here.
Yeah, so I can answer that. So certainly it's been a challenge. The telephone companies obviously are all regulated federally, but we're continually reaching out to those partners for information and engaging them and working with them to try to prioritize some of their restorations with Nova Scotia Power. So it's always helpful when we have those connections in place.
Brian, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, and I think this is also for you, Jason. We've heard that cruise ships have been diverted from Cape Breton to Halifax. I'm just wondering if you have information on that, how many vessels that would be, and how many people would be aboard. And I guess, given that the situation is not great in Halifax, what can be done for the people being diverted?
Sure. I'm not aware of a cruise ship being diverted, but that'd be certainly under the Transport Canada Authority. So we can certainly reach out to Transport Canada and get something to you a little bit later.
Thank you.
Great. Next, we'll move to Ian Fairclough with the Chronicle Herald. Go ahead, Ian.
Hi, this question is for Jason as well. Just wondering if you've got a handle today on, I know that roads are blocked and cleared, but have you got any handle on the number of roads that have washed out, bridges or culverts that have washed out that's made the roads completely impassable, and what kind of timeline you would have on repairs to those?
Yeah, so Public Works is out doing basically a province-wide assessment on what's been damaged, including bridges and roads and what's washed away. So what we do encourage people is to go to 511, the Public Works website, to look for information on what's closed and what's open. But really, we're trying to ask people to really stay off the roads so that they kind of stay out of the way. Driving into work this morning, there's a bucket truck from Nova Scotia Power trying to work, and there's cars zooming around them. So we're really asking people to stay off the roads. And if you do have to go on the road, to visit 511 and to see if that road is actually open.
And do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, this one would be for Bill, I think. Just with the number of people that have been displaced in mostly in Cape Breton, and your involvement. I mean, are you stressed as far as resources and people? Are you able to handle what your role is for these next few days?
Thanks for the question. We certainly have adequate capacity to handle the influx coming towards the Red Cross right now. If we should experience a surge in demand and requests for our services, which we anticipate as the days progress and people have a clear understanding of their own assessment of the damage on their property and more importantly, their primary residence. But we also have the ability, not dissimilar to the military, although not the same scope, of course, but we bring in personnel as needed from outside of the affected areas the most. So thankfully, although there is impact in New Brunswick to a lesser degree than in the province of Nova Scotia and the other provinces, so we would, if we didn't have enough right away on the ground as we experienced the surge, we would bring people in first from New Brunswick and then keep going west until we, fulfilled the requests. But right now we have adequate capacity, and in part because we are encouraging those who have access to the internet and phone to contact us and register either by phone or online at redcross.ca/Hurricane Fiona. And that would be the best way for them to, we would have a record of they are in the system, they are in an affected area, they have been impacted some way. We're not asking them questions right away when they register, but it gives us an opportunity to follow up and ask questions. What is your situation? What has happened? And how can we be of best support, whether that's directly through the Canadian Red Cross or through referral to a more appropriate government agency or another nonprofit, depending on the circumstances that they're dealing with.
Okay, next we'll go to Ian Nathanson with the Cape Breton Post. Go ahead, Ian. Do we have Ian on the line? Okay, let's move on to Adam Cook with Telehill Community Television. Go ahead, Adam. Adam, you're on mute.
Appreciate that, Marla. Thank you. Thanks to everybody for making yourselves available to all of us today. First question is to Jason Mew, and it's concerning fuel supply. Obviously, there are areas hugely impacted by this storm and by the dwindling fuel supply. You look at CBRM, you look at the Cabot Trail in different parts of mainland Nova Scotia. I am wondering, though, just in light of shortages that have been happening in other parts of Cape Breton as well, and here in Port Hawkesbury, where I'm coming in from, both of the gas stations serving the town have run out. Many people are having to go to Alt's Cove or to Bedeck to be able to fill up. And I'm seeing people from Antigonish having to go all the way to Truro to fill up. So what is the thinking in terms of trying to replenish the fuel supply for gas stations? Is it a provincial approach? Is it a regional approach? How do you folks in your office work with the oil companies to make sure everybody's able to get gas?
Yep, no, thanks for the question. We have a great working relationship with Imperial and Irving Oil. They're great to work with, and what really impacted the fuel supply is obviously, the storm and the widespread loss of power. One thing that's really is going to help just this morning is that the Sydney terminal now is fully functional. Their power has been restored, so Cape Breton will soon see a lot of local fuel flowing into that region, as well as Imperial and Irving have prioritized fuel deliveries for Cape Breton and Eastern Nova Scotia. So it should rectify itself. We're asking people not to make a run on fuel. So if you don't need to be out on the roads and you don't need to fill up your tank, you have half a tank, we just ask those people to kind of hunker down at home and monitor social media. But the fuel supply is going to get better because deliveries are out now and the power's been restored to those suppliers.
Adam, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I do. This one to Matt Drover from Nova Scotia Power. Mr. Drover, it's been conventional wisdom for quite a while that crews can't safely go out to restore power if the wind is 80 kilometers or higher. That being said, we have been seeing rolling thunder showers coming through Cape Breton Island this morning. Did that impact your crew's ability to be able to restore power in different parts of Cape Breton and northeastern Nova Scotia, or is it still full speed ahead?
As you mentioned, there was some lightning this morning. It pretty much went through the entire province. When there is localized lightning, that can delay us getting the buckets up in the air. Thankfully, that didn't last for too long, just a few hours with the lightning. So it did have a few delays in terms of getting buckets up in the air. but everybody's full speed ahead now and making great restoration progress.
All right, thank you both.
Okay, Lindsey Armstrong is with the Canadian Press. She's having issues with her audio, so I'll ask her question. It's for Christina Lamy with CBRM. She's wondering if CBRM is getting the support it needs and what the top priorities for support are in the area.
Number one, having the military into support in regards to helping with clearing around the debris around the power lines that are down to allow Nova Scotia Power to restore all of that infrastructure. Moving on from that with the military to assist in helping the road clearing aspect of it. I think our own forces have been at that a bit, but then also moving on to people. Ultimately, people have been incredibly displaced by that. We think we're well over 200 residents who are not housed right now because of the damage from Fiona. And moving quickly, as our experience was in the floods in 2016 and whatnot, to give those residents peace of mind that the Disaster Financial Assistance Program is there for them and is going to take care of their needs. It really couldn't come to them fast enough. They're sitting in shelters right now wondering what their future is. So any kind of movement on that and having that connectivity with the province and through the federal government for that personal assistance to people who are displaced right now is very important.
We do have time for one more question from each reporter, so I'll cycle back through. We'll start with Jean Laroche with CBC. Go ahead, Jean.
All right, this is both for Ms. Fleck and Ms. Lamy. In both your municipalities, what are people supposed to do with branches, trees, and debris?
I can start on that one. Number one, that we have crews that are out removing trees and debris from roadways. When it's on someone's personal property, it's generally their responsibility. We have our dump sites are all opening on Tuesday to allow people to cart off any debris that they themselves have cleared. We're kind of having some experiences though too, and we will have this as we go forward with people who have some significant damage on their personal property who don't necessarily have the means to hire a contractor to come and chop up a massive tree and haul it away. I think the mayor is going to be asking the military to assist in some of that as well in the next few days. But generally speaking, we're going to be moving all of that debris to our sites for disposal.
Ms. Fleck, do you have anything to add to that?
Very similar, of course. So if it's on your personal property, then it is the homeowner's responsibility. We have doubled the amount of brush and trees to 10 bundles, starting with pickup today in your compost pickup. And we have brush dump sites that are issued on our PSAs yesterday, with one additional site that will be coming out very shortly.
Okay, next we'll move to Jonathan McGinnis with CTV. Jonathan, do you have an additional question?
I do, yeah. It's for Mr. Drover. Mr. Drover, how many additional crews do you have in the province from other areas, New Brunswick, Ontario, Quebec, that type of thing, helping out with the restoration of power?
We've brought in hundreds of additional crews, all the way from Ontario, Quebec, all of Atlantic Canada, the New England states as well. They're on the ground right now. So we have over 1,000 people on the ground right now as we speak, restoring power. And we have more people coming in every day to help with that restoration.
Okay, let's move on to Brian Flynn with All Nova Scotia. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I guess this is for Mr. Drover as well. I'm just wondering, a lot of the estimates for power restoration in the province say Wednesday. I assume that's sort of a placeholder in a sense that was created a few days ago. I'm just wondering if you have a little more information on when, how long people in different areas might be expecting to wait.
Absolutely. Our focus right now is getting the biggest outages back on as quickly as possible. So those outage events where the most customers are off. So all of our crews are dedicated on that. Once those are restored, they move into the smaller outages and then into the individual customers from there. The best way to get an update is to go to our website. As soon as the crews get on site and they understand the extensive damage that's in place, they will be updating those estimated restoration time. They will be on the outage map, and that'll give you some perspective. But as I said, the damage is extensive. Yesterday was a big day of getting out and scoping that. We had helicopters in the air. We had drones doing that assessment. And today is all around getting crews in the field, rebuilding those lines, getting those poles up in the air, getting the wire strung, and getting the power back on.
Okay, next we'll go to Ian Fairclough with the Herald. Ian, do you have an additional question?
Yeah, this is for the Rear Admiral. So you mentioned that you've got a company plus or more than 100 people in each of the areas that you're operating. Just wondering if there are more coming, if there have been any requests for that, or if not, what your capacity is to add additional people. And if it does get large, what are you doing for accommodations?
So we have quite a bit in reserve. We're working today to understand the scope of the tasks and have the ability to add to all three of those groups as required if we get more requests. We reconstituted what we call our immediate response unit in Gagetown, and so we could double it up in a matter of days without any challenge at all. In terms of accommodations, they're all staying in the reserve units in various places. So in fact, the people that we generated in Cape Breton came from Cape Breton, and we're all headquartered out of Sydney. The folks that came across from Gagetown to PEI are being housed in the Naval Reserve unit there in Charlottetown. And again, we'll use the reserve units in Newfoundland in order to house folks. So we won't be a burden on anybody when we bring troops in. We'll be able to sustain them ourselves.
And next we have Adam Cook with Teleo Community Television. Adam, do you have an additional question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Marla. I'll direct this one to Matt Drover from Nova Scotia Power. This is more of a perspective question than anything else. You had spoken earlier about the mobilization of power crews coming in from different parts of Atlantic Canada, from Quebec, from Ontario, from Maine. Is this, to your knowledge, the largest gathering of support crew from outside of Nova Scotia to respond to power restoration efforts following a weather event here in the province?
You're absolutely correct. This is the biggest mobilization that we have done in our company's history. This storm had the strength of Swan and the size of Dorian. As everybody has said, it's a generational storm, and our response to that is to respond to a storm of that size.
Thank you.
We have had one more reporter join us, Tim Bousquet from the Halifax Examiner. Tim, do you have a question?
I do. I have a question for Jason Mew. After Juan in 2019, then Premier Stephen McNeil said he wanted the telecom reps to be at the Emergency Management Office Command Center during the next hurricanes. Has that happened?
At this time, the telcos are working remotely. And we're in touch with them remotely and through Public Safety Canada as they're federally regulated throughout Canada.
Tim, do you have a follow-up question?
I do. The following year in 2020, when Ted came through, EMO manager Paul Mason said that essentially the cell phone tower problem that was experienced in Juan had been solved. The problem was that there was only 12 hours worth of batteries and they would have generators installed. That hasn't happened. And in fact, the power went out almost immediately when this hurricane came. Can you comment on that?
I think that'd be really a question for the telcos to answer, whether it's Bell or Rogers in regards to their own infrastructure. Some of their towers have battery backup, some of them have generator, but they would be able to speak, I guess, more in detail on that. I know some of their towers a lot of those towers are still without power. Some are on generator and some are on battery, and some have no power at all. But we're working with them as much as we can, and it is a difficult situation sometimes liaising with different agencies. But we're doing our best to put them in touch with Nova Scotia Power and prioritizing those sites so we can get those back up as quickly as possible.
Okay, that's all the time we have today. Thank you very much to our participants for joining us here and to the media for your questions. Have a great day, and we'll see many of you back, I'm sure, for the Premier's announcement later this afternoon.